Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Eugene's March 6th, 2026 program, Black History is American History. My name is Thomas Hiura. I'm a volunteer with the City Club, and it's my honor to welcome you to another of the many forums we've held since 1990 in the name of our mission to build community vision through open inquiry. City Club is lucky to be a trusted, open, and independent voice for Eugene area community members to be heard. And as a lifelong Eugenian, I believe the community is fortunate to have the City Club, but particularly to hear from our program guests and questions from the audience, whether here in the beautiful Wow Hall, online, or over the radio. Anyone who attends a City Club forum has equal access to asking questions in our space. We believe these gatherings and broadcasts around critical community topics strengthen our understanding of one another and ultimately our ability to support the community building work in so many sectors of the Eugene area. In today's fractured information landscape especially, we want to be a place where you can participate in unearthing, disseminating, and sharing relevant information in conversation together. We would love for you to browse our past programs at cityclubofueugene.org or our YouTube or Facebook. Please consider becoming a member if you'd like to support our volunteer work as Oregon's only city club with a weekly forum schedule. There are many ways to partner with us, and I'd like to thank our Diamond community sponsors. The University of Oregon has helped Oregonians question critically, think logically, reason effectively, communicate clearly, act creatively, and live ethically since 1876. Get more information at uoregon.edu. Lane Community College transforms lives through learning. LCC provides comprehensive, accessible, high-quality educational opportunities that promote student success. For more information, visit lanecc.edu. Thank you to the City of Eugene and to Lane County for their generous support, and to our web host, 9 Planets, whose website support is critical to our functioning, making it easy to sign up as a member, donate, or learn more about us. Summit Bank is our Sapphire sponsor, and we're proud to bank with Summit and grateful for the contributions of Summit's employees to our club and community. Quick reminder, please silence all devices in the hall. And with that, I'm proud to turn the mic over to the coordinator of today's program, Joel Corin.
Welcome to the third time that Dr. Johnny Lake appears here at City Club. It's now an annual event, and we learn something each and every year. On March 27, 2025, President Donald Trump signed an executive order, quote, restoring truth in American history, end quote, causing many revisions to the programs associated with museums, monuments, libraries. For example, Independence Hall in Philadelphia had an exhibit about George Washington's house and the slaves who lived there. It was ordered to take down the information about slavery. A Justice Department attorney tried to defend the move, saying, quote, ultimately, the government gets the right to choose the message it sends. The government chooses history. A senior judge said you can't erase history once you have learned it, but if you don't ever learn it, you won't remember it. History serves as our teacher, taskmaster, providing lessons and chores as well as warnings. If we pause to look back, we will find historical information that is invaluable to our understanding of the present and making good progress toward the future. Frederick Douglass stated, we have to do with the past only as we can make it useful to the present and the future. American history, as presented in the mainstream white culture and many educational institutions created, is often inaccurate and a false image of America. What impact will these changes, or these attempted changes, have on education, the U.S. population, and ultimately the truth? We're going to hear from Dr. Johnny Lake. Dr. Lake is a consultant and a trainer on community building, equity, diversity, and leadership. He focuses on what young people need to do to participate fully in the community and in education. His scholarship has centered on diversity, race, culture, and personal and organizational growth. He is an internationally recognized writer and storyteller who uses the story to build the relationships. Most stories have something about his grandmother in them. I don't know why, but... And I've had the honor of watching Johnny work with high school students at South High School, teaching them about race, culture, ethnicity, and getting them to think about these important concepts. It's my proud honor and duty to introduce Dr. Johnny Layton.
Thank you all very much for the opportunity to visit with you again. I don't like podiums or stages. I wish I was down there with you so I could talk to you instead of at you, but we're doing this for a larger audience. So thank you for your patience with this arrangement. I titled this presentation today, "We Hold These Truths," because that's a founding document of this society.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. We hold these truths to be self-evident.
Blood will tell.
That all
The
men
white race must dominate.
are created equal.
The Teutonic people stand for race purity.
They are endowed
The
by their
Negro is
Creator
inferior and will remain so.
with certain
This is a
inalienable
white
rights,
man's country.
that among them
No
are
social
life
equality, no
liberty,
political equality.
and the pursuit of happiness.
In matters of civil rights and legal adjustments, give the white man, as opposed to the colored man, the benefit of the doubt, and under no circumstances interfere with the prestige of the white race.
That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving just powers from the consent of the governed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed.
Thank you. This demonstrates the incredible contradiction that started with this country. And Africans and African Americans, since arriving here on this continent, represent a contradictory presence and a counter-narrative to the claims of democracy and freedom. Commonly used metaphors for conscience include the voice within or the inner light. As Americans who are often denied the benefits of being such, African Americans have proven to be a conscience, a voice within society, and an inner light that has illuminated and challenged injustices in what was a declared democracy and free society. Our knowledge of history is significantly related to our ability to recognize connections, to understand relationships, to positively engage in the present, and also influence the future. A generally limited approach to African American history has left many of us misinformed, confused, or ignorant respecting this critical component of American history. This leaves many of us limited or ill-prepared to engage in a modern conversation about African Americans and related American history. Black history is American history, and so is many other present characteristics of people who have come here. We must understand African American history and establish its proper place in the larger story of American history. African American history is American history. Alluding to the place of what was then termed the Negro in America, Harvard-educated W.B. Du Bois stated that the Negro was made in America. This has come home to me with some of my African colleagues who come here from Africa, and they say it's the first time that they knew they were black. I have white colleagues who have immigrated here from European countries, and they say it was the first time they realized they were white. To show you how located this is in this culture, in this society. A woman from Finland, I met her in the airport. Her little girl was her mini-me, looked just like her, both of them as white as anybody you ever seen in your life. And the little girl was playing with me, and so I eventually got to talk to the mother, and she says, I don't consider myself white. I said, what? She says, I'm not white. I said, what are you? She says, I'm a Finlander. But she says, when I came through immigration, they asked me what was my race, and I told them I'm a Finlander. And they said, that's not a race. She said, yes, it is. I'm a Finlander. And she said, they gave me this list, and I had to pick one of these. And she says, that's the first time I identified myself as white. And she says, but I still don't think of myself as white. I've given you a conundrum in a handout that asks you to define race, culture, and ethnicity separate from each other. I've given this test to superintendents for school districts. I've given it to CEOs of companies. I've given it to all kinds of incredibly powerful, influential people. And no one has been able to give me a clear, cogent definition of those three constructs of identity. And that's not by accident. They are conflated, is the word, with each other so much that we often are talking about culture when we think we're talking about race. We're often talking about ethnicity when we think we're talking about culture. We're often talking about culture when we think we're talking about ethnicity. So there's one challenge for you. And the other challenge was a couple of bingos that I used with different audiences. One is African American. The other one is Oregon. How many Oregonians do we have here? You should ace that Oregonian bingo there. But I found that most of us don't even know a lot about the diversity of our own state. So I want you to think of this as an introductory conversation to our ongoing learning. Because they gave me 30 minutes, and you know that's not long for a professor to talk about anything. So I hope I just whet your appetite to do more research, to do more conversations, to do more talking with each other, to also call out people like me or other people in the community who say that they're here to help us all to learn and to grow. Because that's how we will get past these kinds of issues that are buried very much in our history. This effort requires a close reading of our historical documents and texts. It requires pretty honest personal self-reflection. It requires group discussions and dialogues and responsive research. Key text, focused readings, video and audio materials all support our learning. And so challenge yourself to be engaged more fully in understanding this incredible American society. I made a PowerPoint, but I didn't get a hold of Joel to let him know I had a PowerPoint. So I got a PowerPoint, you don't. So I'll use it for my notes, and we will fill the rest of this time with some of the things I put in a PowerPoint. Basically, in philosophy, they say we are born a blank slate, tabula rasa. How many people heard of that? You come in this society knowing what about race, gender, class, sexual orientation, ability, disability. So you have nothing when you get here. Where does it come from? Where do we get all the knowledge that we take for granted is true? And this is where education comes in. And also a key word, if you're taking notes, is context. As simple as that word is, context. Context first defines our worldview, then context controls our worldview. I'll say that again because that word is that important. That your context has defined your worldview, and then from then on, your context will control your worldview unless you learn something different. So how did you learn about race? And this is a conundrum for many of my colleagues because I ask people, give me a definition of white. I have PhD colleagues who cannot. There's another challenge for you too, so you got 3 now. What is the definition of white? When was America a white country? Anybody answer that? When was America a white country? Never has been. Finally, most audiences, they'll not respond at first, but then they'll find it's never been. Well, how long has America been a multiracial society? From the very beginning. I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, training police, and an old native grandfather policeman raised his hand. He hadn't said anything my whole session. And when I asked that question, he raised his hand. He said, "We didn't have any trouble around here with race until these white people showed up." And that's one dynamic of Native culture that's so interesting. They did not define their families or their communities strictly along lines of skin color. How many people know that? That white people were adopted into Native tribes and became part of the village. In fact, the white colonizers here said that black people and Native people could not associate with each other because when a black slave ran away, guess where they went? To the Native village. And once adopted in the Native village, were they any longer slaves? No, they were part of the village. And I learned something in my research about Native cultures. We always think of tribes as being one tribe over there, and one tribe over there, and one tribe over there. They called them polyglot villages. That there were Native villages that had 2 and 3 tribes in the same village with multiple languages, interacting, working with each other. So diversity, what we consider race, is really too limited to talk about the incredible diversity of this society from its very beginning. Also, the way education works is it's a double-edged blade. It's a double-edged blade. Paulo Freire says there's no neutral educational process. So it ain't no middle of the road. Ain't nowhere to hide. He says it's doing one of 2 things. It teaches you about the system you live in and how to conform to it, how to fit in, or it's teaching you to think, he calls it critically and creatively, and participate in the transformation of the world. Now, I want you to think about your whole education and what has it done for you? Has it taught you to fit in, go along with the program, go along with the people in your neighborhood, go along with people at your job so you can keep your job? Or did it teach you to be critical and creative and participate in what? Transformation of the world. And that means you don't throw a hand grenade and say, oh, that's change, but you do not accept the status quo. You do not accept maybe what you have learned. If you've grown up in a racist household, in a racist community, in a racist town, in a racist state, in a racist country, do you walk around every day saying, I'm a racist, I'm a racist, I'm a racist? You don't even imagine you're racist until you leave that context and go to another context and you tell somebody that joke that you always told, and they say, hey, that was racist. What's your first response? No, it wasn't. My grandpa told that joke. You know, we always told that joke. I'm not racist. Guess what? I got a black friend. How many people heard that one? I told the joke to them, and they didn't say anything because that person of color didn't want to confront you about your own racism. So if somebody offers you that kind of criticism about anything, and I use race as a lens because we have a really good lens for race because we have such a long history with it. It's so pervasive in our society. But it applies to gender. That's why women identify many times with the racial issues because they have had gender issues. One scholar says gender and race are co-constructive in American society, that both of them indicate whether you are privileged or not. So being male and white is double advantage. Being female and of color is double disadvantage. And so when we think about education, we want to make sure we are getting a real education, because I think the misinformation sets us up for the problems that we have now. Not understanding that this is the story of an incredible society. We are attempting to do something that no other nation has ever attempted to do. You know that? We're attempting to do something that no other nation has attempted to do, bringing all these people together. Thomas Jefferson advocated for freedom of religion way back then. And all of the rights that they advocated for themselves, guess who was also listening to that? Guess who was listening to those claims for freedom and rights and privileges and everything else? The Abigail Adams. Don't forget the ladies. Those enslaved people. They knew what it meant to be free. They said, if you want to know about freedom, one historian says, ask a person who never had any of it, which were the enslaved African Americans here. Ask them what is freedom. They can tell you better than the people who enjoyed it every day. And a concept to remember is privilege is most invisible to who? To the ones who have it. They don't even think about it as a privilege until it's challenged or called out or named. And then usually, well, you know, I don't have any privilege. I work just as hard as you. Or I don't get any advantages. When in fact, privilege is built into the systems of this society. Because Thomas, George, and Benjamin, they were trying to get away from England and the monarchy and the church and all those things that kind of control society. That's why they did the things they did here. But they brought, I think it was 60-some% of the people who wrote the Declaration of Independence had held royal office in England. So you think they came here to set up a democracy? No. In name, they set up a democracy, which in Greek means demos and krasi, people rule. What people? Abigail Adams told John, John, don't forget about the ladies. He went right down with the boys, and what did they do to the ladies? X'd them out completely. Women didn't even exist as citizens. People of color were not counted. Native Americans, we learned a lot about our system of government from Native Americans. They were not included. Latinos were already here on this continent. They were not included. A white guy who was digging potatoes for his living, did they tell him, break off at lunchtime and come down and sit down with us? We're doing a Declaration of Independence Constitution. Regular Joe, even if he was white and male, was not included. And that was not democracy. And so I think ever since then, our project as a society, that's why they always keep saying a more perfect union. Or I heard Barack Obama talking about the experiment, that we are still yet attempting to develop a society that accepts, supports, encourages all of its people. The interesting thing is that knowledge is really powerful. And there's a quote, Alvin Toffler says, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those people who cannot read and write. How many people know we're in the 21st century right now? We're in the 21st century. He said it won't be people who cannot read and write, because we typically think of that as being literacy. He said it will be those people who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. I'll say that again. Cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Which one's the hardest? Unlearn usually gets 70, 60, 70%. Relearn usually get 20, 25%. What do we overlook? Every audience overlooks learn. How do you know what you know? Where did you get the knowledge you got? Have you been suspicious enough to think, well, maybe I don't know everything that I need to know, and continue to learn? And so take that as an admonition to continue to learn, continue to question. Don't accept face value knowledge. Somebody like me, if I tell you something, ask me, where did you find that out? And I used to get that a lot in my presentations until I started providing the resources for the people. Don't nobody ask me no more. Is that weird? Well, where did you get that information from? I was meeting with a little group of older white guys out in Shed. Well, where did you get that information from? So I took my books out there. They still got my books. This is how invaluable true learning is. One of the things I wanted us to cover today was the fact that this history is very, very important. To understand our present, we have to understand our history. That's why erasing this history is really problematic. I looked up whitewash, because Joel and I had this conversation about the title. I didn't like it very much. But whitewash is an interesting definition. Anybody know about whitewashing fences? Tom Sawyer? Whitewashing fences. And they said it was the cheaper way of covering up the dirt or whatever was on it instead of getting real paint. That's the first definition. But then second, to gloss over or cover up something, such as a criminal record. To exonerate someone by means of a perfunctory investigation or unthorough or thoroughly biased presentation of data. To alter in a way that favors, features, or caters to white people is number 3. This is why whitewash became acceptable to me, because I think besides offense, it also covers up the truth. It covers up the truth. And we need to be as concerned with the truth as we are anything else in this society. W.B. Du Bois, the first African American to graduate from Harvard University with a PhD, was a very interesting man. He says, I was in Harvard, but I was not of Harvard. And he said, I spent most of my time in the cafeteria trying to convince the matrons that I was not a waiter. But he made it through that school. But he says about history, one is astonished in the study of history at the recurrence of the idea that evil must be forgotten, distorted, skimmed over. We must not remember that Daniel Webster got drunk, but only remember that he was a splendid constitutional lawyer. We must forget that George Washington was a slave owner and simply remember the things we regard as credible and inspiring. The difficulty, of course, with this philosophy is that history loses its value as an incentive and example. It paints perfect men and noble nations, but it does not tell the truth. H.L. Mencken, anybody remember who he was? He was quite a writer. He did the Scopes monkey trial in Tennessee as a reporter, and he was very critical of American society. He said, the men the American public admire most extravagantly are the most daring liars. The men they detest most violently are the ones who try to tell them the truth. They call Harry Truman, give him hell Harry. Harry said, I never gave anybody hell. I just told them the truth. They will think it's hell. George Orwell says, during times of universal deceit, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act. History is a people's memory, and without a memory, man is demoted to the lower animals. William Faulkner said the past is not dead. He said it's not even past. We may not be responsible for the past, but we must face it, or we may end up reliving it. How do we create an Oregon and an America that is rich and respectful of all its meaningful differences, yet committed to the common goals of creating a bright future where all our children, our elders, and the rest of us can live in a community that works together for justice and equity? Edmund Burke says the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. To do nothing. I teach my students democracy as a participation sport. If you do not participate, you do not have any. I had 100 children at the Capitol. We did mock legislature. I don't know if anybody heard of that, but they bring all the kids in. They all get to run for governor and all the positions and just go through the whole process. And that year, for the presidential election, 21% of 18 to 21-year-olds voted for the president. So I put that data up, and I told the 20 kids on the back row, would y'all stand up? They stood up. And I said, everybody else turn around. Look back there. I said, those 20 people made the decisions for everybody in this room. So when you get the opportunity to vote, we should all cherish the opportunity to vote. It's a precious part of a democracy. It doesn't work unless we participate, and that's all of us. The voter suppression is not new. De Tocqueville came here in the 1830s. Frenchman, prison official. Say he came here to examine the prisons. He wasn't telling the truth. He came here to examine democracy because nobody believed democracy could work. The monarchies looked down on democracy. They call it irritable democracy. They say, how are you going to run a society when you let every ignorant person have a right to vote? You got to tell people what to do. You can't let them choose. So he didn't think democracy would work. So he went to the polls and went to the electoral college to see how it actually worked in practice. Who was there? Did he see any women? Did he see any people of color? So he approached this white man and he says, doesn't the right to vote extend to the Negro? And the white man says, yes, of course it does. He said, well, why aren't they here? And the white man says, well, there are some men here who will treat them very rudely if they dare to show up, so they choose not to come. What's already predicted for this next midterm election? People will choose not to come for their own safety and well-being because they will be threatened. If they dare to do what? Dare to show up to vote. That is wrong, and we should address that. The nature of identity in American society has always been a contest as well. How many people are German in here? German ancestry. German ancestry. I usually make everybody stand up, and we eliminate people by having them sit down, but I won't do that to you. But Germans were not considered white when they came here as immigrants. How many German people knew that? How many other people knew that Germans were not considered white? What about Irish? Irish people? How many people know Irish were not considered white? Could I pick on you? Would you stand up? Yes. No, Yeah. Can everybody see this person? Is that a white person? What would disqualify for her for being white? What? How do they know? Take a look at that woman. Is she white? Might have been poor, so her class status may give her away. What else? Her last name. What else? Accent. She's speaking English with that accent. What about the food she's eating? What does it smell like? What about her religion? Is this race? This is culture. And so in order for that person to become white, guess what they had to do with their own identity? Thank you. Don't speak English with an accent. I've had elders tell me that from European immigrant families. Don't speak our language outside of the house. How many people heard that? Don't speak our native language outside of the house. Marry a real American. I heard that one. Marry a real American means don't marry another immigrant like you. Marry a real American. Go to the right church. Get the right job. Be patriotic. Join the military. All of these things were ways that people could enter whiteness. Does that seem weird? That you had to strip yourself of your cultural identity in order to take on an identity that to this day I have not found one person who can give me a definition of what white is? Is that not strange? And we need to interrogate this because this category is what's driving a lot of the conflict in our society. How do you sustain whiteness with a multicultural, multiracial society other than separation, segregation, or violence? I can take you to the schools and our children are not looking at each other based on their skin colors. They may be attracted to each other for a whole bunch of reasons that has to do with who they are, but they're not picking their partners based on ethnicity or race. And as we go forward, this conversation is going to get more and more important. And so the navigation of history really helps us to understand the dynamics of these racial conversations now. because for the people who gave up their cultural identity, why did they do that? Why would someone give up their cultural identity? Guess what the definition of citizen was? Free, white, and 21. That was the first definition of citizen in American society. Free, white, and 21. So in order to become a member of this society, there were whole cultures who were willing to give up their cultural identity in order to be accepted into the white majority of this country. And that's where we are now, is looking at the need to erase the actual history of American society and create this narrative that says only white people contributed to America, that only white men deserve the privileges and benefits of American society. When I work with CEOs and high executives in companies, I always ask them, I said, before we get started, I want to get a thinking error out of your head. How did it get in your head that all the rich benefits and advantages of this American society belong to you in the first place? So that if a woman gets a job that's traditionally held by a man, they say she took it from who? Is she qualified? She's not qualified as the man. She can't be, right? She's a woman. If a person of color gets a job that's traditionally held by a white man, what do they say? Must be affirmative action, because he can't be more qualified than the white man. But if a white man gets a job that's traditionally held by another white man, do they say that he took his job? No, they assume he must be more qualified than me. Do you see how gender and race plays into the way people are judged and measured and assessed in this society to this day? So that I teach with another professor who's a white male who has a PhD, and I ask my class, we often have this conversation, is my PhD the same as this man's PhD? And the students will first say yes. But as we explore our histories working in universities, guess who's the tenured professor, him or me? No. Guess who's listed as the instructor for the class? Guess who has more years of teaching and study and work, him or me? I do. Guess who admits that you're a lot better professor and teacher than I am? My white friend. But in the structure, in the system, he's tenured. I will never be tenured at anybody's university because I don't play the game. So we had what? 2 minutes? You're supposed to tell me when we had 5. As we started, this conversation is really about telling the truth. And why is it so difficult for us as a society to tell the truth? There's a great scholar who's done a piece on innocence and guilt. He says the rhetoric of innocence persists as an important tool in discussions of race. Innocence is connected to powerful cultural forces and ideas of religion, good and evil, and sex. Innocence is defined typically as freedom from guilt or sin. The idea of innocent victims, particularly when coupled with the specter of those who victimize them, is a pervasive and potent story in our culture. The fact that our entire culture is pervaded with racial stereotypes reflects and influences the complex and complicated evidence of the individual and collective choices that make our schools, our neighborhoods, our workplaces, and our lives racially segregated. He goes on, notwithstanding that the public ideology has become non-racist, the culture continues to teach racism. Racism today, paradoxically, is both irrational and normal. Racism is at once inconsistent with the dominant public ideology and is yet embraced by each of us, albeit at an unconscious level. When our culture teaches us to be racist and our ideology teaches us that racism is evil, we respond by excluding that forbidden lesson from our consciousness. In the rhetoric of innocence, conflicts between groups always involve the definitions of who is innocent and who is not. I would say none of us are innocent. I do this with audiences. You know I'm not sexist, right? We've been friends a long time. You know I'm not sexist. And I've been knowing you a long time. You know I'm not sexist, right? And this is another good friend of mine. You know I'm not sexist, right? If I got to keep saying that, what are you going to start figuring out in a little while? How sexist is this guy? If every time I see him, you got to say, hey, I'm not sexist. So if you are a white person, you don't have to say, I'm not racist. Just don't be racist. And if you see racism happen, say something about it. It's not a facility of skin color. This is how we will address these issues, not individually, not with the black people over there and the white people over there and the Latinos over there and the Native Americans over there. That's a forced historical segregation. We will address these issues together. We will get to justice for this society together. It won't be separately. So I appreciate you listening to this conversation. I do have answers to those questions of the quizzes I gave you out, but I'm yet to get an answer on what is a person who's white. What is white? So let's see. I have one more quote. Audre Lorde. Anybody heard of Audre Lorde? Oh my goodness. I mean, I've been reading her the last 3 or 4 years. I'm a close reader. I love to read. I mean, my books look like somebody chewed on it. She is incredible. I always love James Baldwin because he writes so multi-layered that you can read his stuff over and over and get something different every time. Audre Lorde is that good. I would tell you to read about that woman because she says, I have no use for guilt, yours or my own. Guilt is just another excuse for inaction. And last quote, without a rigorous and consistent evaluation of what kind of a future we wish to create, and a scrupulous examination of the expressions of power we choose to incorporate into all our relationships, including our most private ones, we are not progressing, but merely recasting our own characters in the same old weary drama. Thank you.
Dr. Lake, I first met you when I was a North Eugene High School 9th grader, and you are still doing work there, and you invited me back this morning. I accept. I will come visit your students. Thank you. Before we begin our Q&A, a special thank you to our award-winning public radio station, KLCC, for airing City Club programs on Mondays at 7 p.m. In the metro area of Lane County, they broadcast on 89.7 FM, and in Florence area on 88.1 FM, KLFO. For those listening at home or in transit right now, your household is one of several thousand tuning in to City Club on KLCC or KLFO. We are grateful to, and honored to have you. You can also find all recent City Club programs archived at klcc.org, as well as on our YouTube channel and the City Club of Eugene podcast. Now, if you'd like to ask a question, feel free to line up at the microphone, and we'll have a short break before Q&A.
As you're thinking about what questions to ask, as part of the, quote, Restoring Truth in American History, the Department of Defense has banned 596 books, including Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me and Isabel Wilkerson's Caste, among other popular works dealing with race. Books on LGBTQ plus issues, transgender issues, feminism also made the banned list. The National Park Service has also removed signs dealing with Native Americans and climate change. First question, please.
Dr. Lakes, great job there. I really enjoyed that. I was in the military, 82nd Airborne, at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. A lot of prejudice at that time, 1959, 60, somewhere in there. Anyway, 1960 or so. And I went on overseas to Okinawa, getting ready for Vietnam. And when I came back, I guess during that period, they had what they called the Freedom Riders. And so I got back and I read about that. And turns out I'm a Christian man. And I said, you know what? And I wrote a thing. I still got it written down somewhere. And it said I put it down in this context, the seed of, let's see, where's it at? I've got it here. It's the seed of freedom. And those few, the original ones that got on those buses and headed south, they got beat up pretty bad. And I think one almost got killed. I don't know, some probably did. But nevertheless, I was, enhanced by that. I just really hit me. And so I wrote all of that line. What do you got anything to say
Sir,
about
do you have a
that?
question for Dr. Lake?
About, okay, and the other one would be the Navajos, separating their language from there. And then they end up being the code talkers and saving a lot of lives. So
Yeah, the civil rights movement, in fact, they call it the Second Civil War sometimes in this American society, because it was a struggle to try to right some of the things that had been wrong. The Civil War is really interesting. I don't know how many people have done a deep study of the Civil War, but Abraham Lincoln was not anti-slavery. Abraham Lincoln was pro-union. And he says, if I can preserve the Union without freeing the slaves, I will not free the slaves. He said, if I have to free the slaves to preserve the Union, I will free the slaves. And so the South was kicking North's butt the early part of the war until he issued the Emancipation Proclamation. And guess what the black people in slavery did then? They were the backbone of the war effort for the South, was the black slaves who were still working in the South. When they quit working, guess what happened to the South's war effort? That's when you start seeing all those Southerners with no clothes and no food and trying to continue to fight because they didn't have a supply train coming from the South. And there's a story of a slave woman was leaving the plantation, and she'd never been free in her life. And they told them they was free, and she was leaving, and the slave master wanted to know, well, where are you going? She says, I don't know, but away from here. And so those stories, I think, are informative in the way that I think democracy has changed. Study the women's movement. I saw pictures of women who were in jail with handcuffs over their head. You know that can kill you? You know, you can not breathe. They had women for trying to go to vote. So when I work with young women now, I tell them, you have some history that you should pay attention to in the struggle that allows women to have the rights that they have now. I work with several families who have special needs children. Look at the history of that community and how I've been in mental hospitals where they have chains on the walls still in the basements of the hospital where they used to put mental patients and just chain them to the wall. And so all of these things, when you think about a society that says it values its citizens, all of them, we still have a lot of work to do.
Andrew?
Andrew Kallick, City Club member. Thanks so much, Dr. Lake. It's great to have you back here. I have 3 little kids, and I am raising them to be proud Americans, which doesn't mean that I shield them from history, but rather we talk about it openly, and we learn to love our country and be proud of it in spite of our flaws. There's a certain strain of thought, though, that America is, and these are quotes you might hear, irredeemably racist, or that America is an illegitimate nation because it's on stolen land, for instance. Mm-hmm. And I wonder what you think about that type of framing of American history, and whether you worry about whether that type of framing might undermine the project that you discussed earlier. Thanks.
Thank you. Really good question. I tell people I do progressive work with children and I have to do remedial work with you adults. Because you know, kids don't have trouble talking about this. Einstein says, in the pursuit of truth and beauty, you're permitted to remain a child all of your days. What does a child say about something that's unfair? How long does it take them? Do they need to read a book and take a class and go 6 months before they know something is not right? That's not right. Their little heart jumps out, their little conscience jumps out, and they know that this was not right. And so you talk about justice that way, and the children understand it. Like I have one little family in Springfield I just met last year, 2 little girls, they're white, but they love for me to come and visit. The mother is a good friend of mine, nothing's going on, it's just the little girls, they love it when you come and tell stories for them. And they've started asking, why do some people treat people differently because of their skin color? And these little girls are kindergarten and I think 2nd grade. So we say children don't notice this stuff. They do notice. The truth is the best safeguard, I would say, for our children to understand our history and not to dance around it, because one day they'll probably be as big as you and they'll say, Dad, how come you didn't tell me the truth about this? Why'd you tell me a lie? You know, because the history is not pretty, but it is our history. And that's what Maya Angelou says, our history, in order to get past it, we have to face it if we want to get past it. And I think that's why each generation, we keep seeing this same stuff come up. I work with a lot of little kids who are racist, and I look at them and it's like, where in the hell did you get this kind of racism? Because, you know, that's historical. That's back to World War II or the Civil War or even before that. But you got kids who are 15, 16 years old who are white supremacists and believe that the only people who should have anything in America are white people. And that's not the truth. My grandfather was sold at 8 years old for $500. I got the paperwork. I can show you the deal that was made for him. Then I got the paperwork at 17 when he joined the Civil War fighting on the side of the Union. Is he American? Is he American enough to vote? American enough to receive the benefits of this incredible society? And so the same thing with Native people. When the man talked about the contributions of Native people to our society, they are incredible. Latino communities, contributions to our society. The only person to get 2 Nobel Prizes was who? Anybody know? A woman. Marie Curie. Marie Curie. They didn't even think she was supposed to be a scientist, and she ended up with 2 Nobel Prizes. And so, again, as I said, this project is to bring all these. Well, I'll tell you about Harlem. Harlem Renaissance was the result of the biggest community of black people that existed anywhere on the planet Earth. All came together in Harlem, and read about the Harlem Renaissance, because all those cultures and people coming together, boom! Everybody loved what happened in the Harlem Renaissance. That's what we deserve as a society here. We should be the leader in this world on all of these issues of women's rights, gay, lesbian rights, children's rights, all of these things. We have the capacity to do that. We came up on a continent that was the envy of the world, and it's still the envy of the world in many ways. We are the richest society on the planet. I asked 4th graders, I said, are we broke? They said, yes. Think about what our 4th graders are hearing in American society when they say, we broke. I said, oh, because it surprised me a little bit. I said, well, let me ask you a question differently. I said, is America the richest country in the world? They said, yeah. I said, is America the richest country in the whole history of the world? They said, yes. I said, so why can't we pay for your education? They said, because you don't want to. 4th graders.
Randy?
Randy Prince, you mentioned Native people. I'm kind of wondering how much it helps to really put the spotlight on natives and beyond just the land acknowledgments we're hearing. I'm thinking of Canada. You can't go anywhere, it seems, without hearing about the First Peoples. And they are a very welcoming and diverse country. I said, well, what does make them different there? I mean, they had French and English-speaking people to work together, but we had English and Spanish-speaking communities. Do you think the better acknowledgement of native peoples would help?
My first year in Oregon, I listened to native grandmother speak at the Capitol. And she made me cry twice because she reminded me so much of my grandma in Tennessee.
I told you.
And no, grandmas are universal icons in every single culture that I visit. I got 2 grandmas in Turkey. They don't speak English, I don't speak Turkish. But they love me and they're waiting for me to come back so they can cook me traditional Turkish food. The grandma came up to me, she was short, and she was looking at me. Everybody practically hit the floor when she came in because must have been something when she was younger. But I'm 6'2", she was like 4'11" or something. And she grabbed my collar and pulled me down so she could look at me. And she just looked in my eyes for like 30 seconds. And she turned to everybody in Turkish and said, "He's good." Did she see Black Johnny, American Johnny, Christian Johnny, gay Johnny, straight Johnny, or did that woman see me? And so I think made me come back here and wonder, what do we do to each other when we meet people? Do they got to dig their way through our stereotypes and our already held beliefs and everything else, and then we finally might see them? And so I think we can do better interacting with each other. And I have stories from everywhere. Anybody know where Shed is? Mm-hmm. You don't get to Shed by accident. I mean, you got to be going out to Shed. And I walked in the little cafe to get a drink of water, and there's about 12 or 15 old white guys sitting over here at like 6:37 in the morning. And when I walked in and got my water, I went up to the counter, everything stopped. Like in the movies, you know, like, scooch. And I said, I should talk to these guys. And so instead of going out, I went on, what you guys doing out here this time of morning? They said, we eat breakfast out here every Saturday morning, the biggest talker in the bunch. We eat breakfast out here every Saturday morning. Why don't you come join us? You know he was being facetious, right? Guess who showed up next Saturday morning? And they were like little 12-year-old boys, had to tell me all their jokes and all the little things they had to say, trying to insult me or see if I was, too sensitive about it. But this was 6 years ago. We still meet. They don't tell the jokes anymore. We talk about things that really matter. Talk about what's going on in society. They know my 6 grandsons. They follow my grandsons and the basketball teams they play in. I've had conversations with them about why they were kneeling at the football games, because they thought they just being disrespectful to the flag and to the military and things like that. I said, no, they're not. They're kneeling because black men are getting killed in the street. I said, my 6 grandsons. I said, policeman shot one of my grandsons. Would you say anything about it? Would you say anything about it? Would you say anything about it? So we have a relationship. They invited me to their church thing in Albany. Must have been 150 white men in there. How many black men? 1, me. And they were so proud to introduce me as their brother. Don't underestimate what it means to have a real meaningful conversation with someone else. In light of your question, Native people have a different engagement with this America than any of the rest of us. And if you think about their history, it makes sense. We are living on land that they know belong to them. And we celebrate our accomplishments, our great nation, and everything else. And it's almost if I came to your house and said, okay, you go live in the back room back there, I'm going to take the rest of your house, and we're going to have a great house. And you can come out when I let you come out. So the African Americans have a certain loss in our communities that should be recognized by this society for what has happened to us. We were taken from our original countries. We were stripped of culture. We were not allowed our languages. We couldn't play drums. We developed a culture that was somewhat underneath the oppression of all these hundreds of years. I love my grandma because she taught me so much. that she never even used words. When I work with Africans, they tell me, "You African." I ain't been to Africa yet, but my grandma and the culture I come up in taught me a lot of the values that Africans have. And so when we look at Native people, I think we have to account for the fact that it was a genocide. You look at the numbers. What's happened to Native people since we first showed up here, it equals a genocide. And nobody loses that many people without there being a consequence for it. It's the same thing with our COVID situation. Over 1 million people died in our society. You think it's not a consequence to a society? Spiritually, emotionally, psychologically? Or are we just going to go back to business so you can go back to Burger King and go back to McDonald's and go back to the bar and go back to the casino and forget about it? Our children are suffering from this COVID today. How many people know that? That the children in our school systems right now are suffering from what happened in COVID a few years ago, and are we accounting for it? Are we kicking kids out of school? Or talking about they got problems? Not accounting for the real emotional, psychological damage that that kind of crisis has on human beings. You can deny it if you want to. You can say, "Oh, I go to the bar and get drunk and I forget about it," or whatever you do to ignore it. But significantly, this society has suffered and still suffering. When we see people that don't have food.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time.
Yeah. We have a lot to talk about. So
Come back next year, the first Friday in March. Johnny will be here again. But if you want to read more about the history of black people, particularly in Eugene, the Register Guard 2 weeks ago on February 22nd had a long piece about the interesting and somewhat tragic history of black folks here in Eugene. I recommend it highly. Thomas.
Thank you, Joel. One more time for Dr. Johnny Lake. This has been our March 6th, 2026 conversation at the City Club of Eugene. We'll be back next week here at Wow Hall in downtown Eugene on Friday, March 13th at noon. That program is called Challenges in the District Attorney's Office. It's sure to be a good forum, and we're looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you all. Have a great weekend or week, and we'll see you next week at City Club.